Welcome, everybody. This is Iterating for Success, a case study in remote paired programming. My name is Kathy Ellison, and this is Michael Stewart. He goes by Stu.
Hello.
And today, in the spirit of this conference, we're going to share with you a little haiku that we wrote. Would you like to drive, or should I?
No, please start us off, Kathy.
Okay. Here stands my pair, and
together we will share from
where? I do not care.
Our apologies to Ansi, and we hope we can still get a selfie with you later on in the conference.
Today we're going to start with an intro of who we are and tell you a little bit about the team and where we are a pair. We're also going to share with you a little history of CoreLogic and the factors that led the decision makers to move to the cloud. And we're going to set the scene with an illustration of CoreLogic Labs and how we have integrated Agile. Stu?
All right, and then I'll take over from there and drive. Kathy will touch on Agile XP, but I'd like to step back and we all start from a common ground, because sometimes we assume that we all are, and then we'll go into remote pairing, and I'll talk about some of the things that we considered success factors, and then we'll do some concrete, what do we do? What's our environment look like? Finally, we'll wrap up with a sample day in the life of a remote pair at CoreLogic.
Whoa. Sorry, guys. Okay, like I said, my name is Kathy Ellison. I've worked at CoreLogic for about 2.5 decades. And in that time, my jobs have ranged from data entry, from being a developer, and also being an Oracle DBA. For the last 2 years, I've had the pleasure of working on an Agile team with Stu here. And it's ranged from about 3 to 6 pairs in size, depending upon the time frame. Stu, what about you?
About a decade with CoreLogic, and I started off doing object-oriented programming, 3-tier architectures, SOA, ESB, and it's probably been a lot of waterfall all through that, but as of past couple of years, we've started to move to Agile and XP processes, doing full stack development, and pairing, which is what we'll get into.
When our project first started, we were leasing a room out of the downtown office location of Galvanize. Every day when we did our stand-up meetings, we would look at the ever-evolving landscape of Austin, Texas. The project we were on or have been on is called the Spatial Replatform. It's a legacy app being transformed to the cloud, and it's known as RiskMeter 2. Initially, we had 3 pairs and a PM, and we were very lucky in the early stages to have 2 pivots assigned to our project. Our project was so successful, however, that other projects took off around CoreLogic, and we lost our pivots, and we had to look for talent elsewhere. That's when we decided to stand up a pair on the West Coast, a single on the East, and also a pair in Kiev. And we're going to go over that a little bit more later on in the project. We felt it was necessary to give you a little bit of background of CoreLogic. And keep in mind, this is my disclaimer, I'm not in marketing, but in researching this project, I did find out a lot more about CoreLogic than I realized, and I'm kind of proud. So let me start off with a little bit about what CoreLogic does. CoreLogic is the leader in real estate services. We have in-depth property data, and it's paired with analytics for clients. Those clients are in different business segments, such as mortgage lending and servicing, as well as insurance and real estate sales. If you go to CoreLogic.com today, which is where I went to find out all this information, you would find a slick engineered gateway with easy access to products and solutions. CoreLogic provides unique property-level insights for its clients. Okay, let's see. CoreLogic was founded in 1991, and it's headquartered out in Irvine, California. And over the last several decades, we have maintained billions of records of intelligent property data with financial analysis. And being a former DBA, I'm quite interested in this part of it. Our data consists of mortgage-backed securities, such as Fannie Mae and Ginnie Mae. We also have asset-backed securities, such as home equity loans and refinances. We've got property tax data and also geospatial parcel data, which I'd like you to say quickly, which has location, coordinates, and property attributes. We also have flood data, credit data, and also criminal background records. As you can imagine, though, after all these years of growth and through many mergers and acquisitions, the CoreLogic IT leaders realized soon that they were supporting quite a complex infrastructure. And a lot of it was outdated and with lots of redundant data. According to one CoreLogic decision maker at the time, we had maybe 50 or 60 siloed technology stacks throughout the different lines of businesses, and they were cobbled together. He continued to explain that these different tech stacks, though they have served us well for many years and have been delivering great solutions for our customers, if we wanted to continue to grow, we needed a new foundation with a more streamlined infrastructure. Enter the cloud. Why cloud native? Well, with cloud native, we could have a common and scalable platform that it could be established where CoreLogic could quickly meet some strategic goals. One of those goals was to consolidate about 700 applications down to approximately 300. And this would help not only reduce maintenance costs, but also decrease all of that data redundancy I was telling you about. And the second goal was to establish an ecosystem where we could improve our data and facilitate innovation and drive faster product delivery. CoreLogic, well, we evaluated lots of platforms at the time, but we finally decided to go with Pivotal because with Pivotal, we could leverage the expertise of Pivotal Labs to help us in replatforming our applications to the Pivotal Cloud Foundry. In this new partnership with Pivotal, we were able to stand up CoreLogic Labs. It's our own homegrown digital lab, so to speak. With PCF, we now have the means to deliver faster, and with blue-green deployments, we can establish a zero downtime deployment strategy and maintain high availability. In the labs, we also adopted an Agile methodology. With that, we could emphasize tighter iterations as well as frequent communications between our clients and the team. We also have a development strategy now which consists of paired programming with test-driven development and a continuous integration and delivery. The CoreLogic dream for an infrastructure transformation was now a reality. Co-location was the mantra in the early days of the labs. With the labs, we focused on a team with collaboration, and we developed a new iterative workflow, and it became commonplace. Today, that's the workflow that we use on the Risk Meter project. We have weekly iteration planning meetings where the team will point a story and oftentimes review either a bug or chore that our PM just got the requirements for. We also participate in a weekly retro meeting where we can review any process changes that we feel might benefit the team in the future. A sustainable development team that maintains a constant delivery pace is what we've strived for. But what would happen if a sustainable pace with a co-located team was not possible? What if the customer requirements were coming more quickly than the team could sustain? I'm going to hand it over to Stu, where he's going to elaborate and advocate to you further. Stu?
Thank you for that intro and background.
You might want to just press the button. That
I'm
thing
gonna
is
try
kind of
the
hot.
clicker. Look at that.
Okay.
I might even venture away from the podium a couple of steps. All right, I wanted to walk back one or two slides when Kathy touched on Agile, and like I said, we make some assumptions that everybody's kind of doing the same thing, or you already know more about it than I do, or as much. But I think it'll be important, and you'll see why as I go forward and we start talking about remote programming, why I want to come back to here. So I'm curious, and I think it's going to be a majority, well, I shouldn't say anything, how many people are doing Agile? Right, nobody's doing like waterfall anymore. Okay, so why do we do Agile? I think it's cope with change and better software, faster, confidently, and at a sustainable pace. So those are like me taking a couple of the buzzwords and putting them together, and of course Ansi in his keynote says, go faster forever. Much more succinct, that's what we want. So that's why we do Agile. So now a show of hands of people that do extreme programming. All right, that's kind of what I expected. It's a little bit less than that are doing Agile. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these things, but I did do some background in preparing for this presentation that I hadn't looked at, like my Extreme Programming Explained book in a couple years. I went back out to the Extreme Programming org site, even went back and looked at the Agile Manifesto and read through that. And then I underlined the things that I thought that remote pairing impacts. So obviously, I think we know it's going to be clear communication. Some of the things that are nuances are in the respect. And then when you get into the practices, it's the sit together, the whole team, and an informative workspace that I think everybody's going to be kind of curious about. Obviously, if you're doing it, paired programming is part of it, test-driven development, continuous integration, delivery, all those things we want to achieve, right? So a lot of times when I talk to people about that I work in a labs environment and then I pair program, take remote pairing out of the picture, they are just curious. That's the thing they're the most curious about. It's like you sit there with somebody else all day long. What about the double cost? I can tell you that there have been studies, and obviously we've been doing it for years. Pivotal is a very successful process. They don't pitch like some of it, but not paired programming. So why do you do it? You want to share context. You don't want that one person that only knows about a big piece of the code that's critical. Let's see, you are always constantly reviewing your code. It's always being refactored. So there's not like a code review process that happens later. You don't have technical debt that builds up. And then, you know, pairing helps you to focus and work on those things that are the top priority that have been identified in your backlog. You know, while I was like looking or doing some background, I was like, what if like on Kubernetes I could like do holograms and we wouldn't have to.
Whoa.
Oh, I got off topic. Come on. Okay, stay focused. All right. All right. I think this quote actually may come from my manager. Do what works for you. Try not to pick and choose. It may have come from a pivot. I don't know. You've been doing this long enough. And the reason this one came up is because oftentimes I believe my manager will go out and visit sites that are doing labs, quote unquote. They're doing Agile. They're doing XP. But what they tend to do is try to just take the things they think make sense. And those things that they don't make sense, they don't even try. And then they wonder why the labs environment's not working for them or it's dysfunctional, okay? So I remember when I first started with CoreLogic, when I told you we were doing waterfall, that looking over the shoulder of somebody is not paired programming, okay? It's 2 keyboards, 2 mice, 1 computer, people working together to solve a problem, okay? So I'll end this slide by saying, if we're going to add remote pairing to this, we don't want to introduce any disruptions, okay? So there's our starting ground, okay? So now let's go into remote pairing. All right, should we even consider this? And then I put in here, Stu, but why? Because I work with a couple of great remote pairs that after I share context and I say, this is the direction we're going to go, before I can maybe get another sentence out, they're like, Stu, but why? And I have to make certain that I fully understand what I'm about to present and what the problem was before. They're fantastic pairs because they're actively engaged and we're both remote. But it's just that back and forth that is just like being local for me, and we're remote. So I did some studies, and obviously we didn't do this before we started remote pairing, but it's just for, you know, if you're curious, I have the references at the end of the slide, but obviously there were studies that validated XP and paired programming. We're doing it today. There are also studies that validate distributed paired programming. And pretty much conclusively, they all say that distributed paired programming can be as effective as local co-located pairing. I'll point out 2 of them, and you can look it up. There was a study by Confara, if I pronounced that correctly, I don't know, that said studied virtual pairing by having students use a screen sharing application along with text-based chat application. So no audio channel was provided. What they found was that the distributed pairs tended to stop cooperating and began to work as 2 solo programmers. All right, and then there was a study by Stotts. Again, the paired programming works, distributed paired programming works though, but although distributed pairs successfully completed their programming assignments, they complained of their inability to point or gesture. And I could think these things resonate with what we learned. Okay, so reasons you should. Why consider remote pairing? I think the obvious one is, well, to us, you know, tap into talent from within your company, you know, maybe even outside that's across the globe. If you're thinking just co-locating, then you're constricting yourself to just that location. Allow your developers to work on projects and technologies that could be offered in different places of your company. And they don't feel like they have to leave to find those types of opportunities. All right, and then let's be realistic. So when we started off with CoreLogic Labs 4 years ago in San Francisco, it was an isolated team. Everybody was co-located. And it was great, but the rest of the company was just dying to find out what they were doing. We want to move on to labs as well, get into the cloud, the whole thing. And since those 4 years, we've expanded into about 6, 7, 8 offices, depending upon who you talk to, labs offices. In our GitHub, we have about 800 committers, not quite certain how many DevOps. I mean, we've grown. We're no longer just an application that has no other labs groups that they have to communicate with, and or DevOps, you know. And if the ratios between programmers and DevOps is like what we want, then you're going to have to remote in. You know, you don't want to fall back to email communications. The whole point of co-location is that you're fostering face-to-face communication. It's very responsive, and you're getting things done quickly. So when I was in San Francisco and we were doing the first labs, I went there for a short period. If we had a question of somebody that was like maybe working on the cloud there in San Francisco, we would just get up, walk down, stand behind that pair, kindly wait, and then ask them a question, get our answer, and go back. You can do that in remoting as well, okay? All right, and we have successfully done it. So we're up here speaking about it. We've done it for several years, and we've had up to 5 remotes in 4 different time zones, and compromising almost half our team. All right, so let's go into SuccessFactors. So if you agree that you want to try it, and I think that everybody here is like, you know, you're interested. So these are the things that I took from the slide that we had, and I'll talk to them. Let's see, like communication. So obviously, we agree that audio keeps you from feeling that isolation, and you don't want to be isolated. All right, and you don't want to be texting. You want your hands on the keyboard working on the code. Then there is the video. We know that face-to-face greatly enhances that situation. And without it, how do you know what's going on? When you take a break and you come back, is your pair there? I mean, maybe your pair is distracted by the phone. Do you agree, Kathy?
Josh Long just Twittered.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, so audio, video, okay? Don't discount the importance of video. I think I did initially on, and we had a pivot that when we first started off that was just, I felt obsessed with getting an iPad up so that he could FaceTime in. I understand now. So, respect. What are the nuances of respect? I would say that one of them is like having a headset with a muted microphone would be one of them, because, you know, you don't realize what's coming across. Kathy?
You never gave me a chance to have lunch.
Okay, all right. So those are things I don't think are obvious to you when you start pairing, right? Well, I'll mention it later on. You need to talk about these things. Your team needs to understand. You can't assume that they understand. Retrospectives. Okay. Also, I kind of skipped over here that side conversations. This is one that I think just kind of went over my team. And they did not intend to do it. So, but I had to bring it up in retrospective. If I had not done it, then probably nothing would have been addressed, and who knows how that would have fostered into some other type of problem. So what was happening in that situation was we would have our meetings, and, you know, I'd be remoted in, and then as the meeting broke up, I could tell that the conversations were continuing, and they weren't continuing on things that were just social. They were continuing on things that were decisions that were happening about the project, and I was totally being left out of those decisions. And then when future conversations would come up, I would be unaware, and I wouldn't know how to participate because I didn't understand it. Then I had to go off on a side to get somebody to fill me in. You don't want a team like that. And to be honest, your team doesn't know it's doing it, okay? All right, then let's get into the practices and rules. This is something I think our team did right out of the gate right. And I don't know how we got it right. Maybe it was just obvious to us. But it's work the same hours and attend all the same meetings. So we have 4 different time zones. So for 3 of them, I'll be honest, is the international twist. We'll get to the 4th time zone. But for 3 of the time zones, we all work the same hours. I come in a little later, LA comes in a little earlier. We all start the day, do our stand-up together, just like if we were in labs. It's very important. And as I was doing this, it made me realize when you talk about the whole team, the balanced team, it's not remote pairing so much this presentation's on. It's on remote teaming.
Good one.
Yeah. And then an informative workspace. So I'll touch on this one as well, that one of the things about XP or in this Agile process is that you need a dedicated open workspace the team can work in. And when they talk about an informative workspace, I think the classic thing that comes to your mind is that wall with all the stickies on it. Or after a stand-up, the whiteboard where everybody talks about things that happened and action items that come out of it. Stickies and whiteboards don't work so well for remotes. Oop, a little fast. Okay, so local remote parity. Again, this is kind of a nod to the 12 factor, which being here I found out is actually 15 now with Pivotal. But anyway, there's something called the dev prod parity. And I was writing this up, talking to remotes that are on my team and finding out what their feelings were as well. So it's just not my perspective. And I think this one really resonated with us. Your remotes need to have as close as possible, if not exactly, the same setup as your locals. So I think some of you guys came here and thinking that we might endorse coffee shops or working from home. I'm not going to endorse the coffee shop. And working at home, maybe. It just depends upon your setup and how much of a commitment your company has behind you. So the reason you want this local remote parity to be as low as possible is because you don't want to be wasting time trying to figure out what's different about this machine, to have something personal on it that they can't drive. You want to be able to, it has to be as powerful as the local, because if your builds are supposed to take 10 minutes and they're taking 40 minutes, that's not acceptable. All right, move people around. I think my point on this one is that you want to treat your remotes just like you treat your locals. You want your remotes to facilitate your retros. You want to give your remotes a chance to lead. You don't want to discriminate against them accidentally for any reason. You need to treat them just like you treat your locals. And then the last point is screen sharing. And this one, again, I think is kind of a curious thing, is like screen sharing. It takes a lot of bandwidth. Well, in everything that I was reading, it never talks about paired programming with 2 computers and 2 mice and 1 screen. One little portion of that screen. It's the whole screen. And I will defend that as we continue a little bit further on. And then my last recommendation to you to support remote pairing is travel. So, and then that's like, why would I say travel for remote pairing? A couple of reasons. So the first one that I could think of is like project kickoffs, right? That's fantastic to get everybody together. You have a new hire, and that new hire may be remote. Bring them in if you want to do an immersion into the process. We do it all the time. It works out fantastic. And then a term that's called gelling. So it really helps our team to get together every so often. And we do fun things, like Kathy and I have run an Austin Capital 10K every year for a couple of years. In fact, not just us, many people on our team. And so that gelling, I think, is very important. The video obviously makes a big difference when you remote pair, but face-to-face time is fantastic. All right, now I'm going to start getting into the case study of what we do so you can kind of see. And it's a case study, so it's kind of opinionated. Obviously, you've seen me say that I'm not really supporting the coffee shop thing because you're going to be disrupting the process. So our team uses Aperion for our team meetings, and we have a team room, which I'll show you here in a minute, that's always open, and it's set up with a camera, a microphone, and a monitor, or a speakerphone, I should say. All the team shows up at exactly when the meeting starts, if not a few seconds before, just like being local, and everybody participates. So when we do our stand-ups, action items go into the icebox to be groomed. They're not written on a whiteboard. So when we do IPM, the TPM shares his screen through Tracker, and he's able to drive the meeting that way. Works out great. Pre-IPM works out the same way. And then in our retrospectives, as I mentioned to you, we rotate through who facilitates each time. And so that could be a remote. It doesn't matter. It's just the names through our team just rotate through. And it is, I'll admit, a little challenging to conduct a retro remote, but we do it, and we don't back off on that. And we don't put stickies on a wall. So here's our workspace. And you see there's the classic monitor on the right with the dashboard. The monitor on our left is our always open appear in room. So for screen sharing, we use, we haven't told you what we use yet. We do full stack development, Angular front end, Spring Boot microservices on the cloud. A majority of our work is done in the IDE, but some of it's done in a browser, and we are not always in the IDE. In addition, developers are always, we're working together, and this will defend the full screen thing. We need to do things like look at the story backlog and read the story backlog. We need to do text communications. We craft those together. I'm going to send this message based on me and you, Kathy, as a pair to these people. Do you approve? Yes, send.
And oftentimes we end up having to actually look up how to do a particular task because we've never done it before.
Yep, and we do that together. We might be looking at logs together. And anyway, when you're in those situations, if there's these long moments of one person seeing something that the other person can't see, you're going to break the pair up. It's going to become isolated. So we did look at things like tmux, we did look at things like flu bits, we did look at like all kinds of stuff. But in the end, we're like, why are we looking at this? It doesn't work for us. We're not going to recommend it to other people. We're just going to tell you what worked for us, and then you can try it yourself. So another thing that's really critical here is that both the remote and the local can act as driver navigator. So in this situation, there are times when you ping pong pair. One developer writes a test, it goes red, the other one makes it green by writing prod code. Switching like that, sometimes if there's a lag on the screen share, we recommend that the driver host and that you change back and forth on the driver navigator when you switch those things. And that could be every couple hours or something like that. It works very well for us. We use Zoom. It's a fantastic tool. It allows us to do both audio and video and screen sharing all together. If you have two monitors, you can drag the controls over to the other monitor. You're not always fighting to see things behind the controls. It has recording and it has a whiteboard. It'll also do touch-ups and virtual backgrounds, which is really cool. So here's a picture of our setup. This you can tell is like the classic labs environment. And what I like about this picture of this remote person here, he's got the headsets on that I talked about with the mutable microphone. He has two monitors. They're not mirrored. One of them has the video of his pair with him. What I typically have on split screen on that monitor is the dashboard. So I don't have a dashboard monitor of my project where I work, but I just split screen it right here so I can see what goes red, and I can work with my team immediately to solve that problem. What I also like about this is that this remote station can go local the next day. So stations should be used either which way. Tip we can give you also is like if you want to have conversations with other people with your pair when they walk over and you don't want to disturb other people, is get you one of these digital to analog converters, a DAC and some splitters, have some headsets there, have it ready to go. A couple people walk over, you don't want to disturb anybody, put the headsets on. You've got now a little situation where you can talk without disturbing, and your pair hears, okay? You don't want to leave your pair out. It's not, that's the thing that goes back to the courtesy, is that it's like somebody comes over and you're like, oh, hold on 1 second, and they're left out. It just doesn't work. And then you got to repeat the context to them. So plan for problems. Nothing ever goes wrong when the network's not there. I'm going to go quick here because I want to turn it back over to Kathy. These are simple, maybe obvious things. Have your contact information of your team. Have apps on your phone. Have alternative to the apps available. So if Zoom's not there, we're going to go to not ScreenHour anymore, but Slack. Remote should have complete, I've talked about this, complete development environments. They may go solo because your number of devs are odd. They need access to the back-end systems. Firewalls have to be open. VPNs might slow you down at home. So that's my home tip. If your home network is fast enough and you've got a VPN, maybe. That's fast enough, a VPN that's fast enough. Remote devs may be paired together. If Kathy and I were in the same office and we're both remote pairs, it'd feel really weird that I'm over on this station with a headset on and she's right behind me coding. So we may pair them together, and they need a station that's not dependent upon going to the local station. I'm going to skip that one. And this final one is one of my biggest tips. If you have a problem, bring it up in retrospective. My team was fantastic and addressed all these issues. I'm going to skip a remote perspective, but I will do this last quote, which was, to be an evangelist, you need to believe. This came from one of my remote pairs when we were talking about, I was presenting this. And I'll admit there were bumps in the road when I became a remote pair, but I addressed that with my team. My team's fantastic, and it worked out. And I no longer have any doubts, and I feel like I can stand up here and tell you that if you want to try remote pairing, it definitely works. We've been doing it, and we have not disrupted our process. It feels like we're a very well-oiled gel team. Kathy, I'm sorry, I'm turning it back to you.
That's okay, we've actually gone over time, but I just want to take maybe 30 seconds more if they'll let me. This is a picture of our setup. And I'd have to say the biggest shift that we've gone through in making a paired situation with a team in Kiev is the shifted hours. They actually will work for 4 hours before the onshore team comes on staff, but because they make perfect use of the pivotal tracker tool, that allows them to stay on point, and our team workflow never gets damaged because of it. And we're going to skip the sample day. It follows the same agile strategy that most teams will follow as far as having stand-ups and whatnot. This is a picture of our team. As Stu said, we have had lots of events that we share together, and it's just been a wonderful experience. I'd like to give a shout out to Glenn and Greg for giving me the opportunity. I'd like to thank our pivots. That would be Grant, Curtis, Kat, and Jeremy, and just a lot of love to the team in Austin and LA and Kiev and you over there, and also Bruce Thalen, who's in the front row there, who used to be on our team, but Pivot stole him away. Anyway, thanks everybody. If you're around...
References, and go ahead.
If you're around tomorrow, please check out Kalen Humphreys. He's going to do a talk on continuous data governance with Spring Cloud Data Flow.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody.